All right, let's get into it. The latest global energy data for 2024 is in, and honestly, it tells a really fascinating, kind of contradictory story. It's this huge paradox, and if you want to understand where our energy future is headed, you have to understand this.
So here it is, the big question at the heart of it all. In 2024, we installed more clean energy than in any other year in human history. I mean, a staggering amount. And yet, CO2 emissions, the very thing all this tech is supposed to fight, also hit a brand new record. So how on earth is that possible? Let's dig in. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the two big headlines from 2024 that seem to completely cancel each other out.
And here they are, side by side. On one hand, we have this incredible success story, 700 gigawatts of new clean energy. That is a monumental achievement. But then, on the other hand, emissions ticked up again to a new all-time high. These two things just don't seem like they should exist in the same year. So what is really going on?
Okay, so the first major clue to solving this whole puzzle lies in one specific place: electricity. Because in 2024, our global appetite for electricity didn't just grow, it exploded.
4.3%. That's the number. That is how much global electricity demand shot up in just 1 year. Now, to give you some context, that's almost double the growth rate of total energy demand. This wasn't some little bump, it was a massive, massive acceleration in our need for power.
This chart really tells the story. You can see just how wild that surge was. Our demand for electricity, at 4.3%, grew way faster than the entire global economy, and it just completely dwarfed the growth in overall energy use. The big takeaway here is our world is electrifying at a pace that's outstripping everything else.
So of course, the next question has to be, where is all this demand coming from? What's plugging in? Well, it wasn't just one thing, but a few really powerful forces all working at once.
A huge chunk of it, 60%, came from our buildings. And this was really about two things. One, a much bigger need for air conditioning to deal with crazy heat, and two, the just explosive growth of these super power-hungry data centers. Industry made up the other 40%, and then you have electric vehicles, which are a smaller piece of the pie for now, but a piece that's growing incredibly fast.
And we have to talk about the weather, because a major driver here was the climate itself. 2024 was officially the hottest year ever recorded. That means billions of people were cranking up their air conditioning. And this creates a really intense feedback loop. Our warming planet is directly making us demand more and more electricity.
Okay, so we've got this massive, unprecedented spike in electricity demand. The next chapter in this story is all about how the world scrambled to meet it. And this is where we get this tale of two very different kinds of energy.
Let's start with the good news, because there is a lot of it. Clean energy did the vast majority of the heavy lifting. The International Energy Agency found that a full 80% of all that new electricity we needed came from renewables and nuclear power. That's huge.
And that brings us right back to this incredible number, 700 gigawatts of new renewable capacity. This is the engine that was driving that 80% figure. It was a truly record-shattering year for clean energy deployment.
And when you look inside that 700 gigawatts, one technology just completely dominates the story: solar PV. It made up almost 80% of all the new renewable capacity. And get this, 2024 was the 22nd year in a row that renewables set a new record for expansion. It's an incredible streak, and solar is absolutely leading the charge.
And this is the twist in the story. Even with this historic, world-changing boom in clean energy, it just wasn't enough to cover 100% of that gigantic new thirst for power.
So what happened? Well, to fill that remaining 20% gap, the world turned back to fossil fuels. Demand for natural gas, for coal, and for oil all went up in 2024. So even though clean energy covered most of the new demand, the total demand grew so much that there was still room for fossil fuels to grow too. And that, right there, is the direct cause of our paradox.
So now we can finally connect all the dots, right? We have this surging electricity demand, it's met by a huge boom in clean energy, and a smaller but still significant increase in fossil fuels. So let's look at what that all means for the real bottom line: emissions.
And there it is, the final number that kicked off our whole investigation. A 0.8% increase, pushing our energy-related CO2 emissions to a new record of 37.8 gigatons. So, mystery solved, right? Well, not quite, because there's a much more important part to the story. To really get what's happening, we have to ask a totally different question. We have to ask, What would the world look like today without this historic clean energy boom we've seen over the last 5 years?
And this chart is the answer. It is stunning. Without the growth in clean energy since just 2019, the rise in global emissions over that period would have been 3 times larger. Let that sink in for a second. Yeah, emissions went up, but the situation would have been catastrophically worse if not for the clean energy transition that's happening right now.
This is the key idea we need to talk about: avoided emissions. All that solar, wind, nuclear, all those EVs we've put on the road, they are already preventing 2.6 billion tons of CO2 from hitting the atmosphere every single year. It's not that the transition isn't working, it's that it's in a high-stakes, flat-out race against our rapidly growing energy demand.
So that really brings us to our conclusion. This isn't a story about failure. It's a story about a race, and it's a race we absolutely cannot afford to lose.
And it's a race that looks a little different depending on where you are in the world. In many advanced economies, emissions are actually falling. In fact, they hit a 50-year low. Most of the growth in emissions is coming from emerging economies that are, building out their energy systems to bring millions of people a better quality of life.
So let's just sum it all up. Our demand for electricity is absolutely exploding, thanks to things like AC, data centers, and EVs. Clean energy, especially solar, is growing at a historic pace to try and keep up. But demand is going so fast, the fossil fuels are still being called on to fill the gap, and that's why emissions are still ticking up. But, and this is the crucial part, without this clean tech boom, the problem would be so much worse.
The paradox of 2024 shows us exactly what's at stake. We know we can build clean energy faster than we ever thought possible. The real question, the one that defines everything, is this: can we build it fast enough to finally, once and for all, outpace our growing global appetite for power? That is the race that will define our future.